Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar about designing with real data in ProtoPie. Get ready for an exciting journey into our latest feature, the API plugin. Today, we will walk you through the simple process of integrating your designs with databases and APIs. Before we get started, please head over to the chat and let us know from where you're joining us today. We will be happy to hear from where you're joining us today. So please let us know. Let's see. From Poland. Hi. Hi from Sweden.
I saw a couple people from Toronto.
Oh.
Hello, fellow Torontos.
From Germany, Austin, Texas. Hi, Joanna. Hi, Rick. Okay. Thank you for joining, Regino, Amy, Jasper from China. Hi. Hi, all the way from Norway. Thank you for joining. From India, Parth. Thank you. Okay, while people join, let me briefly introduce myself. My name is Julia, and today I will be your host. Now let's meet today's panelists, shall we? It is with great honor that I introduce you to Luke Han. Luke is a product manager here in the Connect team at ProtoPie. He will give you a short intro to the API plugin, as well as a sneak peek into our future product releases. Luke, would you like to say hi?
Hi, everyone. It's good to see you. Hope you have a good time.
Thank you. Thank you, Luke. Now, today we have Jeff Clark. Jeff is an enterprise trainer and ProtoPie guru here at ProtoPie. You must all be familiar with Jeff from our ProtoPie school videos. So yeah, he will give you a few demonstrations of using the API plugin together with handling errors or making multiple calls in your prototypes. Jeff, would you like to say hi?
Hi, everybody.
Thanks for joining. And last but not least, we have Kanak Lee. Kanak is our head of customer learning here at ProtoPie, and she will give us her best practices of working with the API plugin, along with a ChatGPT demo. So please make sure to stay tuned until the end of the webinar to see her demo. Kanak, would you like to say hi?
Hi, everyone. This is Kanak. Nice to meet you.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you for our panelists for joining today, along with the API introduction, like I mentioned, and a few live use cases of using the ProtoPie API plugin. We have also reserved time for a Q&A session at the end. So make sure to use the Q&A window of Zoom to ask your questions, and we will make sure to cover them at the end. Without further ado, let us get started. Luke, the stage is yours. We're looking forward to hearing your presentation.
Hey, everyone. Are you able to hear me? Good?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Hi, everyone. As introduced before, I'm Luke. I'm a product manager at ProtoPie. It's really good seeing everyone here. And I hope this webinar brings a lot of excitement and inspire you to do more with your design and prototyping. So let's get started. Yeah. Today, we're here to talk about the API plugin, our newest plugin addition to ProtoPie Connect. And before we go into the details of the plugin, let's just talk briefly about ProtoPie Connect. ProtoPie Connect is an extension to ProtoPie Studio, as you may know, and it specializes in advanced use cases for connected devices, hardwares, and APIs, and things like that. So if you want to do prototyping in multiple screens for connected devices, if you want to prototype with hardware or with data, ProtoPie Connect is the right tool for you. And we're also expanding a lot with integrations with Unity and other 3D tools. And we have a couple great articles about that. So make sure to check that out. It's on our blog website. So all these advanced prototyping use cases, ProtoPie Connect makes it happen. And we have many features in ProtoPie Connect, but one thing of interest is our plugins. And plugins are basically no-code, plug-and-play kind of connections that we support. And you can connect hardware or data without having to write any code. And the topic for today is the API plugin, but we also have the plugin for IFTTT, the Logitech G29 steering wheel plugin, as well as Arduino, gamepads, and block dots. So why the API plugin and what is it? So the story behind this is we aim to allow designers to express their creativity in the most realistic and dynamic way possible. We strive to do this in ProtoPie. And nowadays, if you go on the internet, you can get so much data. You have so many great tools in the forms of APIs. And we wanted to allow designers to make use of these great tools that are available with ProtoPie. So that's how the API plugin was born. So it's basically a no-code plugin for interacting with data from web APIs. So we'll go into the details of how you do that, but think of web APIs such as Spotify, things like that you wanted to use with ProtoPie. Now you can do that without having to write any code using ProtoPie Connect. And we think there are several use cases that you can use this with. If your organization has internal APIs, for example, you can use the plugin to make connections to these private APIs, for example. That'd be a good way to use it. Or if you just want to use things for social media APIs or data, getting weather data, sports results, calendar data, these are all now possible with ProtoPie Connect plugin. And another exciting area that we want to showcase later is using them for generative AI or chatbots. So we'll be showing more of that later in the session. And while we have the time, just wanted to give you guys a sneak peek of what might be coming to the ProtoPie Solutions Suite. We have, for Studio 7.9, we have media URL support and also media responses. So you could do things like you can use, in conjunction with the API plugin, you can make requests for cat images, for example, and use it with your ProtoPie prototypes. In this case, this demo has like a connection to the OpenAI DALL-E API. So you can do cool things with that. We also have coming real soon transparent background video support. So you can make use of transparent background videos and do some interesting things with ProtoPie in that real soon. So with that, I want to hand the floor to Jeff, who will be doing the demo. So Jeff, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Luke. Let me share my screen. Let me know, are you guys seeing my screen now? Should say, how does the API plugin work? You seeing that? Yes?
Luke, can you stop sharing? Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great, excellent. So hi, everybody. I'm Jeff. Some of you might recognize me from YouTube videos. If you've done that, that's me, my talking head in the corner. Today, I'm going to be more of your talking head in the corner and take you through a couple of simple examples of how to use the API. First, I'm just going to go through a couple of slides that outline in general how to use the API. And generally, there are 3 steps. The first step is to configure the plugin, and that involves, at its most basic level, we add the API's URL. We create a message that we're going to send from our Pi to activate the API request. We configure a message that ProtoPie Connect will send back to our Pi with the response from the API. And we hit this activate button. It's that simple. The second part is we need to author our Pi to make use of it. So in our Pi, we're going to send that message, the one we configured in the API to send the message. We're going to use that message to send, and this will fire off the request. And then the API plugin will come back with a response, and I want to set up a receive for that second message that we did. And then lastly, I'm going to use that response in any way that I want. And you need to familiarize yourself with the parse JSON function, as you're going to need to use it with the JSON responses. And I'll show you a simple example of that in a moment. And then the last thing, in order to see this in action, you got to run it through ProtoPie Connect. You won't be able to preview this in ProtoPie Studio alone. Everything needs to go through ProtoPie Connect. So you drag your Pi into Connect, and you hit this preview button, and that's it. Or if you wanted to, you could run this on your device, like on your phone or on your tablet, and that would work too. Ooh, all right, so let's do some demonstrations. I have a couple of Pis already set up in Studio here, and these Pis are mostly finished. The first one is what I call the useless fact machine, and if we preview this, it's got a nice animation. I'm going to drag my 5-cent coin into the machine, drop it in the slot. We get this neat little animation. Gumball comes out and it pops up with something printed on it. I would like to make a request out to this API here. This is a free API that you'll find on the web. It's the Random Useless Facts API. And when you make a request to it, you get a little bit of JSON back that looks like this. I'm not going to talk about what JSON is. I'm assuming you're already a little bit familiar with it, but JSON is basically text. And the part that I'm interested in is this line right here. And it's this key name text, and the actual useless fact is this. And you're going to see if I refresh this, I get a different one every single time. So when I make the request out, it's going to come back with this little snippet of JSON, and then I'm going to take whatever is in here, and I want to write it on my Gumball. So step one, let's configure the plugin. And I'm going to go into ProtoPie Connect for this, which is right here. And I'm going to make a new API setting. The method will be get, and most of the APIs you're going to find in the web will be this. Some involve post. The API docs will tell you which one to use, so it's not really important, you know. Then I'm going to take this URL, copy it, and I'm going to paste it right here. I'm going to make up a message, and I'm going to call this message get useless fact. You can make up whatever message you want. And I'm going to make up another message for when the API responds. So one, get useless fact, this one, return useless fact. And I'm going to say activate. And that's it. My plugin is ready to go. I don't have to write any code. If I send a message from my Pi, get useless fact, the plugin will respond with this message with the response from the API. So let's go over here to Studio and let's set that up. This useless fact animation is all handled in this touch up. So when I drag the coin into that position in here and I drop it in, all of this gets run. I'm going to make the request as part of this trigger right here. So I'm going to add a send request to the bottom here. And whenever you're working with ProtoPie Connect, you need to use the ProtoPie Studio channel. And the message I'm going to use here is that first message that I configured in the plugin. And if we take a look back here, you'll remember it's get useless fact. So let's copy that. And I'm going to paste it right here. And then I need to set up a receive for the response. So let's add a trigger, receive. And again, I need to use the ProtoPie Studio channel. And if we go back to the plugin, let me get this guy right here. We'll paste it, return useless fact. Now, this is going to come with the response attached to the message. And in order to work with it, I need to assign it to a variable, like any other receive that has information attached to it. So I'm going to say assign to variable. I don't have one yet, but let's make one. And I'll call this JSON response. You can call it useless fact. Doesn't matter what you call it. It's totally up to you. And I'm going to use make this text because the JSON that we get back is text. So it needs to be a text type variable. In my receive, let's use that JSON response. And then I'm going to get this response. I have the JSON now in this variable. I want to use it. And I have this text object right here at the top, random fact, and I'm going to update that text with that random fact. So let's use a text response. And I'll use it in the random fact text object. And I'm going to use a formula here. And I'm going to use the parse JSON function. If you've never seen this before, you can find the documentation for it on our website. So if you go to resources and then go to documentation, it's going to take you here. And then under formulas, look for functions. And under text, you will see at the bottom of the list, this one right here, parse JSON. I'm not going to talk about how it works. You can read it here, and it tells you a little bit. And we'll probably write an article for our blog that goes into a bit more detail. But essentially, I need to look in the JSON source, which is that variable we called JSON response. And I'm going to look up a particular key. And the word key is specific to JSON, and that means this. The key is named text. And when I do that, it's going to give me back the value of that key. So let's see that in action right here. Parse JSON. The variable I called was JSON response right there. And the key name is text. And I say, okay to that. And at that point, I'm done. So let me save this. And our third step is now to preview it in ProtoPie Connect. Like I said, if I try to preview this in Studio, it's going to look like nothing changed. So if I put my coin in the slot, does my animation, it still just has the placeholder text. I need to run this in ProtoPie Connect in order for me to see this in action. So I'm just going to drag this guy right in here. And my API plugin is already set up, and you can see that it's active because I got this little green dot here. So I'm going to preview it right here in my browser. And now this should work. Okay, let's do another one. Fully loaded super tanker traveling at normal speed takes at least 20 minutes to stop. And I could do this over and over, and I get different fact each time. Hopefully these are safe for work options. There we go. So there you go. That is a very simple example of how the API plugin works. I want to show you one more example, because you'll notice when I set this up, I'm calling the same API or the same URL every single time. Right. And this is just giving me back a random fact. Quite often when you're working with an API like this, you want to add on a little bit of information that describes exactly what you're looking for. And that takes me to my second example. I'd like to do a dictionary lookup for a word. And if we take a look in ProtoPie here, I've got this dictionary one. And if I do a search for the word, I want to send that word off to the API and get its definition. Now, if I were to use this API the way it works, so let's go take a look at the documentation, it looks like this. The first part of the API URL request is always the same, but then we tack on the word to the end of it. So, for example, if I did a search for the word color, for example, right, this is what the URL looks like. But if I wanted to search for a different word, so let's say I wanted to search for the word red, right? It's a different URL every single time. Our plugin only allows for a single URL. So instead, to deal with this, we have the option to override the URL with something provided by ProtoPie. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to set up this API to, instead of providing the URL here, we're going to build the URL in ProtoPie and pass that custom URL along, and then have our API plugin execute that instead. So let's configure this. First of all, I'm just going to reuse this same one that I did here. I'm going to turn on override URL. And notice how this is now blank. Override with message URL. And I don't want get useless fact. This is going to be for a different one. So I'm going to say dictionary request. I just have these copied into notes so I don't have to type them. And I'm going to make this one dictionary response. And I'm going to activate it. So there we go. Now I have a new one. I've overwritten the old configuration that I made. In the dictionary one, all of the work is done in the second one. And you see, I've got these two send responses that are currently unconfigured. When I look up a word, it is stored in this variable called search word. And I've already configured the Pi to do this. So you don't really have to understand how it works. Just know that the word that I want to look for is contained in this variable search word. So let's send the message, remember, to ProtoPie Studio. And the message is going to be dictionary request. And I'm going to send the value together. This is the key to making this work. Remember over here, I clicked on this override. and it says override with the message value. It's expecting the URL as the value of this message. So let's do that. It's made up of two parts. It's made up of this first part. So let's copy this all the way up until the word blue. I'm going to save that. Oops. And then I want to tack on the word, which is the variable search word. And there we go. Now we can see from in here, we've got the first part of it is always the same part of the URL. And then I'm tacking on this. So I'm dynamically building the URL with every single request. I'll say okay to that. And I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it over top of this and get rid of this old one. So it doesn't matter if I do it from the search box or if I do it when it starts, it's going to do it the same way. Once again, save this. Let's pull it into ProtoPie Connect dictionary, and we'll preview it. All right, so this is already set up. I can search for the word of the day, mitigate. So if I click on that, it's going to look it up, and you're going to see I get a response back, or I can search for my own word. So I want to search for the word red or blue or whatever. So this is working, and it'll work with whatever I type in here, except if I mistype something. So let's say I want to look up the word bananas, right? But I actually mistyped it, and I did it like this. Now, this is not a real word, and the API is coming back, and it's giving me nothing. If I search for the word bananas with the actual API, it's already set up to handle this. So let's go here, and I'm just going to search for the word bananas, but misspelled. And you can see I get a response back. No definitions found. Sorry, pal, we couldn't find what you were looking for. The API plugin is already set up to deal with this. If I take a look and inspect this, you'll notice that I'm getting an error back here, and I'm getting an error 404, which you internet people know 404 means not found, which is appropriate for this. Any HTTP status error message will trigger a different response from the API, and it'll trigger a response that we can work with. And I can look at the response, and I can look for oh, shoot, what was it called? I can look for something called status. And if the value of status is error, then I know it's an error. So let's take a look in here. And under my receive over here, I'm going to make a condition. And once again, I'm going to use the parse JSON formula. So parse JSON, and the name of my variable is called definition JSON. And I'm going to look for the key status. Not stats, status. That's better. And if the value is error, I want to do something else. And I already have in my pie here, I've got a no results group. And if I can turn it on, you can see I'm just going to show that. So let's add an opacity response under here to the no results section. I'm going to turn it up to 100. And there we go. That should be enough. So let's save the work here. And when you're working in ProtoPie and I save it, it's going to keep a live link with here. And this will be automatically reloaded with my changes. So I don't have to drag it into ProtoPie Connect again. And let's search for a word. First, let's search for one that I know exists. Great. Now let's search for a word that's misspelled. No definitions found. So there you go. This is how you can craft a URL that is dynamic every single time, and how you can handle an error coming back from the API. And with that, we have one more example to show you, and I'm going to hand it over to Konok, and I'm sure this is the example you all came here to see. So Konok, the floor is yours. Thank you very much,
Jeff.
people.
Thank you. So I'm going to share my screen. Let me know if you can see my screen now.
Yes, we can see it.
That's great. So hi, everyone. This is Connor. So in my part, I'm going to give you a quick walkthrough of how we can prototype a chat experience and connect it to the ChatGPT API. So let's preview this demo first. So here I have a very basic chat UI. So we can type in a question, and then we're going to send this question to ChatGPT. So after a few seconds of loading, the ChatGPT API will give us a response nicely. So since it's a language model, basically we can just type anything here, ask ChatGPT anything. For example, tell a joke. So in that case, it will come back with a joke. So this is something that I prepared for you guys. I try to make the UI simple so that we can focus on the essential logic and the API configurations. Okay. Yeah. So here is my pie. Starting with this, I do prepared with some formatting directions. For example, I have some loading animations right in here. I have some hover effects, click effects for my input box. And followed by this, these two sections will have nothing to do with the API communication. But followed by this, when we tap on the send button right here, then we will send our question, ask ChatGPT, we will ask the API, and then we are going to receive a response from ChatGPT, and finally we will reflect the response on our screen, which is this text layer right in the middle. So starting with this, I'm gonna remove a few content here so that we can set up the pie clean for our starting point. So now I'm gonna I removed a few responses dealing with the API communication, and also a few variables also dealing with the API communication. Yeah. So first thing first, before we dive into making these interactions, the first thing we always want to do is when we're dealing with a new API, is that we are going to read the documentation a little bit. So here is the API reference doc for the OpenAI, or let's say ChatGPT. So you can find this link by just visit this URL, or what you can do is simply search in Google OpenAI API reference doc or ChatGPT API reference doc. This will be the first result you will see. And today we're going to use the chat and create chat completion. This is the API request we're going to do to the ChatGPT, and it will give us a response based on our question or anything we ask ChatGPT. So just like any other API Jeff has shared before, the API does have a request URL and also a method that you need to configure in your API plugin. Follow here, there are very detailed explanations of each parameter. Some are required, some are optional that you need to fill in either in the body or in the header. There's a lot to read for you, but today we just need to focus on the example request and example response. So the example request does tell you how you're going to configure your header. So if you pay attention to these two lines, starting with the H, these are the parameters we need to configure in the header part. And for the body part, starting with the D, this is what we need to send along in the body part. And it does give you a sample response in JSON format. This will give you a bit of an overview of how the response will look like to you. And also you can have a bit of understanding of the data structure that you will have in the JSON response. So this will be a longer content to deal with. And as you know, the API plugin here, we do have very limited room for us to deal with the longer content so far. So I would recommend you to start a page. Any text editor will be fine to document things a little bit before we put everything into the API configuration. So here I have everything identical as what we have in this documentation. I just simplified and put all the necessary information we need here. Same as other API configurations, we need the URL, the method, the header, the body, and also I follow by some sample responses, which we were looking to further. So with this content, with the URL post, we can just simply copy paste this into our API configuration. But if we're gonna pay attention to the header part, you'd notice that this does look different from what we have right here. So as I said, these two lines starting with the H, this will be the header, but it does look different because what I had in Notion here is formatted in JSON. So it's just a different format, but everything we need is just right here. Also, you're gonna pay attention to this part, which is highlighted in Notion. This is the variable, and you're gonna replace this with your own API key, with your own ChatGPT API key right in here. So with this all said, we have the URL, the method, the header. we can just configure these parts in our API plugin. So I've set it up already. So the method will be post. You need to pay attention because the default is set to get. So this is a bit different as the API that Jeff showed before. In this case, we're going to use post, and we have a URL. So this does look different from what we have here. It's because I'm using the API proxy due to where I'm located. It will ensure me better stability for this presentation. But for you guys, you can just use this OpenAI URL. And then we're gonna configure the header. The header, we can just copy paste, but you do remember to replace this part with your own API key. And then we're gonna configure the body. So the body content will be a little bit tricky because as we can see here, it does include one very important information here is in the content part. This will be the question we're going to ask ChatGPT. So now it says, the sample says you are a helpful assistant. If we directly copy paste this content into our API configuration, meaning that every time we do a API request, we're going to ask the same question to ChatGPT. But in our case, because we are having a back and forth conversation with ChatGPT, we do want this question to be different every time. And we do want ChatGPT to give different responses based on a question, meaning that this piece of content will be dynamical in the body. So meaning that we're not going to directly put anything here in the body content, but we're going to override the body content with a message value. So once we send a message from our prototype to ProtoPie Connect, we can configure it to send a value together with this message. And the value together sent from this message is going to override the body content so that we can do different request body every time, including different questions. So this will help us to make our conversation more dynamic. So for the Python message, I'm going to use Ask ChatGPT. So going back to my prototype, when I tap the send button, I'm going to ask ChatGPT a question. I will send this message to ProtoPie Studio channel, and I will use Ask ChatGPT. And I'm going to send the value together. As I said, we're going to send different body based on different questions. So this means we will use a very similar body content every time. However, we do want to include a different message. So what we can do here is we can do a simple modification on our body content, and we won't make it as a template. We're gonna reuse it, and every time we want to insert a different question. So here I have a modified version. So everything else is identical to the original one, but I will replace content. Since the ChatGPT is a language model, first thing I will do is based on the design, I don't want the response to be too long, so I can instruct ChatGPT to reply in no more than 3 sentences. And secondly, followed by a text string called replace me. So this is something we want to replace this into our actual questions that every time we ask ChatGPT. You can use any text string you want, but just later on, we're going to replace this with our extra question. So it's a template we can reuse every time, but every time we replace what's in here. Okay, so with this said, I'm just to copy this into my prototype, and I will create a template with a variable. I'm going to create a variable in the text type since it's a JSON, and I will say body template. And with this, I can just type in what I just copied. Okay, this is a body template, but we want to customize it and send it to ProtoPie Connect. So here, along with our send to ProtoPie Connect this message, ask ChatGPT, we want to include a piece of value. This will be our customized body. So I'm here going to use a function called replace. So for the replace, I'm going to look in the body template for the string replace me, replace _ me. And I'm gonna replace this part into my question. So my question will be whatever content I type into this input box. So I'm gonna use input text property. Okay, once we're done, we can just click OK. Okay, so let's now move on to the point where we receive any response from ChatGPT. So this time we need to configure the receive message to Pi. So we will get this message into our prototype along with the JSON that we receive as in the response. So I will use a message called ChatGPT response. So going back to the prototype, let's receive this from ProtoPie Studio. Also, since it's sent along with a JSON, so we're going to assign it to a variable. So create a text variable to store this piece of content. So I will do chat response. You need to make sure it's in a text type, so that way it can receive JSON, or it can store JSON since it's a text format. And we can assign this value to the newly created chat response variable. Okay. So with this message received, I will do a stop loading. So by the way, stop loading, this is part of a loading animation I prepared here. So it's just communicating internally inside of Pi to trigger the the loading animation to stop. Okay. So once the loading animation is done, I'm gonna reflect what's in the text, what's in the ChatGPT response into this text area. So meaning that I'm going to have a text response, giving it to the content area. And here I'm gonna use formula. And the same as what Jeff has shared, we are going to deal with the JSON content. So meaning we're going to use a function called parseJSON. And the JSON source will be the chat response. And then we're going to look for a retrieval value from what we have in the JSON. So this is why the sample response becomes helpful. Now, this is also provided the OpenAI reference doc. So once you do this kind of request, you will have something similar as this in your JSON response. So we definitely don't want to show everything in here on our screen. The only thing that is helpful or useful to us is what in here, what is in the content. This will be the ChatGPT response to us. So we just need this part of content on our screen. And how are we going to do that? Of course, we're going to use parseJSON. And if you're not familiar with JSON or any coding, I would recommend you to try the JSON formatter. There will be a lot of free tools out there online, and also there are some browsers. You have the JSON formatter as extensions or plugins so that you can use. So what it does is not only it can format or beautify your JSON, but also it can give you a more readable view of your content. So here, let's say we're going to look for content. So the top level here will be choices, and we dig down 0, and then we have message here, and then we look for the content. So the hierarchy will be this: the top level, it will be choices. The next one will be 0, message, and then content. We want to dig into this one level by another until we can retrieve it. Hello there, how may I assist you today? This piece of content, and we want to reflect on the screen. So with that said, we need to remember this order. So the first level will be choices, 0, message, and content. So how do we do in parseJSON? It will be very simple, but we can just do a double quotes, and then it will be choices. Just follow the order we just remembered, and it will be 0, and there will be message, and there will be content. So this is going to dig down into the data structure and find what's inside the content part. It's just simply simple as this. You need a small dot to separate each level, each hierarchy. And finally, you will retrieve what's inside the content part. Okay, yeah, so once we're done, we can just click save, and we can save the Pi. And let's go back to Connect. and we can do a final check on all of these settings to see if it works. And we can activate this plugin. And also, of course, we want to drag the Pi file in here. And then lastly, we can open this in the browser. And this is a moment that you can type anything, ask anything to ChatGPT. And you see, it gives a response. So let's try something else. Let's say, tell a joke. So after a few seconds of loading, we have this joke. And why is ProtoPie so powerful? Let's see what ChatGPT will say. Nice, really nice. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this ChatGPT demo. I think with the help of ChatGPT, you can explore a lot of possibilities in your prototypes, add a bit smart to your design. I hope you enjoy this. And don't forget to leave your questions. If you have any questions, leave your questions in the Q&A. And now I will head back the mic to Yulia. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kanak. Thank you, Jeff. And thank you, Luke, for these amazing presentations. I think we can kick off Q&A. Let me share my screen here for the Q&A. Can you see it? Yeah, you should be able to see it. So let's see. I will cherry pick directly from the Q&A window, and then I will ask our panelists to answer them. So one of the first questions is, how do you add a key to your request? Jeff, I think you can handle this.
Yeah, so, adding a key to your request, often for authorization, it'll be different for every API. And the documentations for whatever API you're using will show you how to use it. In Konok's example, where she showed how to do the ChatGPT request, the authorization key was part of the header. Other APIs may require it as part of the URL. So if you are you want to hit one of Google's APIs, for example, or the Open Weather Map API, you include your API key as part of the URL. And you would do that in the same way that I showed you for the dictionary one, where you would just build the URL inside ProtoPie Studio, and you would include things like the your API key, any other URL parameters that need to be a part of that as well. You could build all of that inside your inside Studio, and then pass that along as a custom URL that overrides what you have set up in the plugin. So it, again, all depends on how the API, the particular API you're working with, works.
Thank you, Jeff. I hope this covers it for you. The second question is from Josh. Josh is asking, how do you handle situations where we need to request different information in different responses? For example, a list of to-dos, or creating a to-do list.
Yeah, I can handle this one too. So there are a couple of different ways. There's a difference between the plugin, between Pro and Enterprise. With Pro, you get a single API configuration. With Enterprise, you can have as many as you like. So what you could do is you can set up different configurations for Enterprise for each particular one. So for example, I might be doing a weather API, and we actually have an example of this, where I want to search for weather by a particular city. And the weather API, when you request for weather, it actually requires latitude and longitude for the location where you want to get that weather from. So the example actually makes two requests. One, to look up the longitude and latitude of a particular city. And then based on that response, I make a second request to the weather API to get weather conditions for that particular longitude and latitude. If you're working with the Pro plan, it's going to be a little bit different because you don't have the ability to set up multiple API requests. So in that case, you would use the ability to override the URL and build the entire URL in ProtoPie Studio, including the different endpoint and everything you need in there, and pass that along to the API. There's going to be some limitations on there. So for example, if you needed to override the URL and the body, for example, it's not going to work for the Pro plan user. So if you have that kind of situation, you're probably going to want to get into the range of building a custom plugin. But in any case, so the Enterprise one is more capable than the Pro plan version.
Thank you, Jeff. Josh, I hope this answers your question. This as a question or more of a request / suggestion for our customer learning team, if we can make a tutorial on using API to populate a table, if that's possible. Let's look into.
Yeah, I mean that's something that I could put together. I don't have a ready example.
Yeah, we can do that. Thank you for the suggestion. Let's see. Paul is asking, can you use an API that requires some credentials authentication?
This has been answered. So we showed you that with ChatGPT, and when I was talking about how other APIs work, it might be part of the URL.
Exactly. Thank you, Jeff. Let's see. Someone is asking, so yeah, we had another question related to, so how can I get the API if it requires user authorization with the platform first? So yeah, that kind of covers it as well. Let's see. Darren is asking, how do we loop a list through a set of JSON? This is a bit of a technical
Yeah,
question.
this is a bit more of an involved answer. And so as you know, Darren, I know you are very capable with ProtoPie. So as you know, we can't generate instances of components on the fly. So if you wanted to loop through a bunch of things, you're going to have to bake in a number of components into your pie. That would be the maximum amount of items that you want to show. So let's say you wanted to do a number of movie listings for your local theater, right? You would build in a number of components in your pie. So to a maximum of, let's say, 20, right? You would build it out for as many as you think you need. And then when you make that request come through, the way I've been doing it is I set up each component with its own ID, and the ID would be the index. So the first one would be index 0, the second one would be index 1, third one would be index 2, and so forth. And then I would pass on that data to the components, and in each component would be responsible for looking up its particular ID. If it exists, then we're going to show it. If not, then I'm going to hide that component. Let me know, Darren. We can talk offline. You can message me later if you want a little bit more detail, but essentially that's how that works. If I do put together a tutorial on how to do the table, it would demonstrate how to do this.
Thank you, Jeff. Let's see, I'm gonna look for another question. So Tobias is asking whether there will be guides, pies, and tutorials available after this session. So yes, Jeff put together a 2-part tutorial on using the API plugin. So these 2 articles will be released tomorrow, along with all the pies, so you can download and test them yourself. Okay, thank you.
And those will be the 3 examples we showed you today, by the way. So the useless fact machine, the dictionary lookup, and ChatGPT.
Yep, exactly. A question regarding dev handoff. Hey, great presentation. Can you share any tips on handing all of this off to the developers? Any best practices that you could share?
So the interesting thing about this is your devs are going to probably be more familiar with the API than your designer. So I don't know if there's going to be a lot of confusion as to how to connect to the API. They're going to do it in their own way through the thing. It's not like they can take the prototype and turn it into code. Obviously, we all know that we don't export any code, but they're probably going to know how to work with the API. So what you could do is you could create a spec that maps the text layers that you see in the UI with the particular bit of JSON that comes back. So this text layer maps to this key. Now, our handoff feature doesn't do that automatically for you yet, and that might be something that we might want to take away and think about. So you'd need a separate doc to document that.
Thank you, Jeff. We have a few questions around image and video integration. So can I use APIs plugins to make, for example, an image gallery without adding the images to my pie?
Luke, do you want to take that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can take this. So the short answer is yes. So if you have an API which gives you URLs of images or videos, then with Studio 7.9, which is coming in a few weeks, you can make use of those image URLs and replace images or assets that you're working with in your Pi dynamically. So I showed a brief demo of using this upcoming feature for getting images from OpenAI DALL-E image generation. So that's one example of it. But it's certainly possible with the future Studio 7.9 release to use this dynamic image and video replacing feature. We call it media response, so stay tuned for that.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. So Saad is asking, this is an unrelated question, but I have to ask if you can add the ability to record a prototype. So in MP4 format. So Saad, this is already available in ProtoPie Studio. In the preview window, you can click on the record button and you can record your interactions, including audio. So Rebecca, if you can share the documentation link to that would be great. Thank you.
So can I just make an add-on to that? That's possible in ProtoPie Studio, but not currently possible in ProtoPie Connect. So if you want to record your prototype as it retrieves data from an API, for example, you'd be running that through Connect. You would have to use a separate screen recording thing like QuickTime or something like that to record your screen. So that's something you need to understand. Yes, MP4 format.
Yeah, thank you. Jeff, follow-on question on there. Any plans to add the ability to instantiate components? I don't know if
I will let Luke tackle this one too.
There are some discussions around it, but I think we have some other more pressing priorities in our hands. But thank you for letting us know that you need these features, and we'll consider them and adjust and plan our roadmaps accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. A question for Konag. So Konag, could you show the connect messages that are sent for the ChatGPT example? Can you do a short screen share on that, if you can?
Actually, yeah. we could do that, but the article that will be released tomorrow will have all that detail.
Oh, yes.
Yes, Kat. So please stay tuned for tomorrow, and we will have all the screenshots and everything. Will be included in that article. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Our article will include all of the information, including how we set up the header, body, set up the URL, and all the messages from the Pi to the Pi, everything in detail. And you can also download the Pis to test out everything we shared today.
Yeah. And I don't know if I made this obvious, but the message is anything you want. Like, you choose what the message happens to be. It doesn't have to be a particular message. You set up the message. You just use the same message in Connect and in Studio. That's it. You could call the message bananas if that's what you wanted to. I mean, it's up to you.
Thank you. A follow-on question from Josh. Can you dynamically add images components to the Pi, or are you just replacing content that exists?
It's the latter. So we currently don't have the way to dynamically instantiate things. So as I was saying before, you would have a number of items in your Pi, and they can be components or they can just be images that are in your scene. And when you get that information back, essentially what this means is you have a known limit to how much you can display. You can hide the ones that you're not using. So if you've got 20 built into your Pi, but your request only brings back 7 items, you can hide the remaining 13, right? You can do that with your interaction. But if there are 21 things that come back and your Pi only has 20, you're limited to that 20.
Thank you, Jeff. Josh, I hope this answers your question. There was a question regarding whether it's possible to use data from sensors connected to an Arduino with the API plugin. Jeff, do you also want to cover this, please?
So I mean, the short answer is yes, but the long answer is you don't really need to. So the Arduino plugin already gives you this capability. You can use the Arduino plugin in a couple of different ways, and I recommend that you take my ProtoPie Connect course on ProtoPie School, and that shows you how to work with the Arduino plugin. It shows you how to do it where you write your own Arduino code, and it shows you how to use it with a third-party product called BlockDots that allows you to set up your Arduino. Basically, you can program the Arduino without writing code. It's similar to how ProtoPie works, and it has an integration with ProtoPie Connect, so that way you can get the information right from your Arduino and then respond to information you're getting from the sensors hooked up to your Arduino.
Thank you, Jeff. I think we have time for one final question, and this is regarding a two-way data sharing. So can you do two-way data sharing at the moment in Connect with the API plugin?
Luke, I'll let you handle this one. I think the answer is no at the moment.
I'm not quite too sure about two-way data transaction, what they really mean by that.
I think
Jeff,
the question was specifically
idea?
if you wanted to do a like an update to a data table on the other end kind of thing. Although I suppose that I guess that depends on how your API works, right?
Yeah, I think it would depend on how the API is set up. I think the post method, we offer the ability to do a post API call, and depending on the API, some APIs allow you to actually write data on the data end with the post method. But the short answer is it actually really depends on how the API is architected and what is allowed and what is not allowed by the API spec. So I think that is something to maybe refer to the API documentation, or whoever made the API, they'll have a better understanding of if it's possible or not. But the ProtoPie Connect API plugin actually supports the post method, which is a common way for writing the actual data on the other end, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Luke. Okay, one final question from Shadiq, and we will wrap up. So Shadiq is asking, is it possible to use ProtoPie Connect on different IPs? So you mean Connect and ProtoPie Studio? If that's the case, then no. So ProtoPie Connect and ProtoPie Studio need to be either connected to the same network or use the same different IPs. And correct me if I'm wrong, Luke. But I think
they can be different IPs, but need to be on the same network subset. So I could have, let's say I've got 4 machines on my local network. One of them is running ProtoPie Connect. Another one is doing the preview, or let's say I'm previewing on my phone, right? Technically, they'll all have different IP addresses, but the requirement is that they're all on the same local network.
Thank you for making that clear. Okay, everyone.
If I may add on, so if the request is, let's say you want to do user testing with your client who is like in another network environment, we do have a tutorial on how you can share your ProtoPie Connect prototype with your clients using a service called ngrok. So that way, if other people on different networks want to have a test on your prototype, I think that will be the solution or the workaround as of for right now.
It looks like there's a follow-on to that on the Q&A. If we combine use different pies using receive and send feature, yeah, that's possible. So you could have one pie that does a send, and that could trigger the API. That API is gonna broadcast the message back through ProtoPie Connect, and any pie that is running on the local network through Connect can receive that message. So you could have your desktop sending a message. It makes a request out to the API, and then the response comes back, can be consumed by, say, one running on mobile, for example, to show that kind of thing. So yeah, that's possible.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, thank you everyone for the great questions. I'm so happy we cleared the queue of Q&A. So we do have to wrap up because we're at the top of the hour. Right before we say goodbye, I would like to encourage all of you to participate in the game prototyping challenge that we are currently running. So if Rebecca, if you can share the LinkedIn post in the chat. So basically create a game prototype in ProtoPie and share it on your social media. Use these 2 tags, tag us, and then you get the chance to win ProtoPie swag, or the biggest prize is a free yearly pro plan that you can use. So please make sure to join until the end of September. So the deadline is quite short. So yeah. And I would encourage all of you to join ProtoPioneers. It's our online ProtoPie community of users. Make sure to join in to get help and to network with other designers and ProtoPie users in general. We also have a discount code for those of you who are interested in the yearly pro and monthly plan. So yeah, use code ProtoPie webinar 23 upon checkout if you want to get 30% off our yearly, monthly, and monthly pro plans. Okay, thank you, Kanak, Jeff, and Luke for these amazing presentations, and thank you to the ProtoPie team for their support, and thank you to our precious audience for tuning in today and for actively participating in the Q&A and for making this an amazing session. I will look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. Take care. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.